So this is the extracurricular portion of the webinar. I kind of explain what we're going to go over, so we'll just jump right in. So a bit about me. I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, but I actually headed out west for undergrad, and I went to the University of Calgary, and I did health and society, so it was like a bit of public health, a bit of natural sciences and social sciences. I really enjoyed it if anybody's in high school and is thinking about what programs. And then I completed 3 years of undergrad before being accepted. These are some extracurriculars that I did, but I'll go over those more in detail. And I'm currently a second year medical student at the University of Calgary. Oh, I don't know what just happened here. All right. Okay, perfect. So the next step is, how important are extracurriculars? So I think that's like a big question, is what does it really matter? Do they look at those sorts of things? And so I think that they definitely are, but it really depends on the school. So Calgary, your extracurriculars can make up 60% of your application. So at Calgary specifically, your GPA is only 20%. Your MCAT CAR section is 10%. And then you have a global academic assessment, that's another 10%. And then 60% of your application is based on how well you complete a set of attributes. So like communication and like being an advocate and things like that, they all have listed. And you have to fill out a top 10 as well as your references, and those things they use to assess that. So it could make up 60% of your application, which is super significant. However, comparatively, McMaster in their application formula, there's very few, there's nowhere for extracurriculars to fit in. However, that being said, if you move to the last point, extracurriculars, I don't think that I would discount them for McMaster, because the interview in their application formula is 70% at the end before you get admitted. So when you're in your interview, your extracurriculars, I think, are super important, because when somebody asks you a question, for example, if you have to say a time where you've demonstrated lifelong learning, or how you're a good leader, or something along those lines, you can draw on your extracurricular experience to make your answer much more convincing. Because if you were to say, yeah, I'm a really great leader, that doesn't really mean anything to me until you say, I'm a really great leader because in this experience I had this conflict and this is how I was able to solve it using these skills or whatever. Instead of saying, oh, a great leader does this and this and this, you can draw on your own experiences in order to prove that to the interviewer. So again, it depends on the school for the pre-application, but I think every school extracurriculars are important for the interview process. And then as well, I think through doing extracurriculars, you're able to build a lot of great relationships. So that's kind of where I got all my reference letters from, was through different activities that I did outside of school. I didn't use any profs, although that could be a great reference letter as well if you have a good relationship with them. But for me, it was through developing relationships through my extracurriculars and what I was passionate about. And then as well, extracurriculars are just tons of fun and add a lot of balance to your life. So I would say overall that they're quite important. So what types of extracurriculars? I think this is like a big question that a lot of pre-meds have, is like whether they have to be volunteering at hospitals or doing like those classic pre-med type things. And I'll get into that, but I don't think that's the case. So I'll tell you a bit about my experiences and go over some different types of extracurriculars and what those might look like. All right, so volunteer opportunities. So I think volunteering is great, but it's also endless. Like there's so many different places that you can volunteer. So that doesn't always mean that it's volunteering at hospitals or homeless shelters. Although both of those are great, there are endless opportunities. So what I would say is think about what you're passionate about, whether that's baking, or maybe you're passionate about marine life or the environment, and pick something that you're passionate about and then pursue that volunteer opportunity. I think that if you just try and fit into the classic pre-med mold, if you're not passionate about volunteering at a hospital or something like that, that's totally fine. And I think when you choose something that you're more passionate about when you're writing your applications or in an interview, that comes across so much more positively. And you just are perceived more enthusiastic and that you really care about what you're doing. And then I think another really important thing too is to think about longevity. So it's great to have like hundreds of extracurriculars on your application, but you don't have to. I would honestly say a stronger application is somebody that does maybe less activities, but for a longer period of time. So that's something definitely to consider when picking extracurriculars. I would say if you already have something going and you enjoy it, stick with it. Because your relationships with that organization will only get stronger. It'll appear that you're very passionate about it because you've stuck with it for such a long time on your application. And you don't need 100 different extracurriculars because that's not sustainable, especially if you're doing everything all at the same time. So what did I do for volunteering? I started volunteering at Windsor Therapeutic Riding Association. So that helps kids with disabilities learn how to horseback ride and offers them some emotional and physical support. And then I started a horse show with a couple of my friends. It was super fun. That's another thing I would say is volunteer with your friends, and it's a social aspect as well as a volunteer opportunity. And like, again, do something that you love. Like I grew up horseback riding and it was something that I absolutely loved. And I don't think horses really have that much to do with the medical field, obviously, but that I don't think matters. I think it's just, you want to pick something that you're going to have fun at, that you can do with your friends if you want, and that you really enjoy. And for me, that was volunteering at Wettra. And also too, that's like, I started volunteering at Wettra in 2012 just as a regular volunteer, and then you can grow from there and expand on it. So my friend and I had an idea to start a horse show, and we've been doing that for the past 6 years now, and it's a pretty big fundraiser for Wettra. So there's always different avenues to pursue and to expand on within the same volunteer opportunity. Perfect. So next up is campus involvement. So I think like volunteering on campus or participating in club and doing things like that is super great. Obviously, it's not like every different type of extracurricular, you don't have to do them all. I think the big theme here is doing what makes you happy and what you're interested in, rather than trying to check off these pre-med boxes, because I don't think that's really that authentic. And like, people in medical school are smart. They're going to be able to pick up on that. So don't try and check all the pre-med boxes. Just do what makes you happy. So if that's clubs, then join a club. You can gain a great social network. And there's also different ones in so many different interests. So I think that that's great. And you don't have to pick a medical one. None of the clubs that I did were medical. So I think that just do what you're interested in. So it's a great way to connect with other students. I found that throughout university, for those not yet in university, finding a great circle of friends and having those connections, whether those are made through clubs or through residence or through classes, that really helped me excel in university, whether that was I was doing a lab report and I could ask a question from somebody or studying for tests together. And this might be a great way to connect with other students. Also, you can combine it with volunteer opportunities. So a lot of the clubs I did were a bit volunteer oriented. So they had some aspects of an interest that I had combined with volunteer opportunities. And then also campus involvement doesn't just mean clubs. Yeah, like club fairs are a big part of it and an easy way to join. But there's also a lot of different leadership opportunities. So I know at Calgary, they had a leadership student engagement center, and there was volunteer positions there. They organized different events for students on campus, and there was also paid positions too. So getting involved on campus doesn't mean just volunteering or participating in clubs. It could also be a paid position too, if that's something that you guys are interested in. It'll just be involved going to your local student's office or students' affairs. I know at University of Calgary, it was like the leadership students engagement or the wellness center or things like that, and asking about those opportunities. So just getting yourself out there, seeing what's available at your school, and then going from there. I know that's a bit challenging with our online environment, but at least at Calgary, there's a good website that we have for all the different clubs, and you can email them. So maybe if there's something like that at your schools, that might be a really good resource, as well as just kind of creeping the school website to see what the student offices are and if they have any jobs available. And also just throwing out an email too. I know a lot of opportunities aren't always posted, so even if you can't find like your student engagement office or something like that, emailing someone, and if you're super nice, they probably will connect you with somebody that can help you. So my experiences in clubs, again, like they're kind of all over the place just because that's what I was interested in. So the first picture there, one of my best friends in university was Ethiopian, and she started Ethiopian Eritrean Students Association. I have no relation to Ethiopia, but she was a really good friend of mine and needed somebody to do the marketing, and I loved Ethiopian food. So I was happy to help her out, and it was a ton of fun, and a couple of my other friends joined as well. The bottom picture there is I had another friend in first year that started the STEM fellowship branch for University of Calgary. So she needed a treasurer, and obviously I'm interested in the STEM fields. So again, and my entire first year floor joined, so that's all of us down there. And again, like combine it with friends. It's great whether you're meeting them there or through the club. Honestly, I've made great friends through this. And also too, the last picture is baking. I'm super interested in baking, and we actually didn't have a club on campus yet for baking. So if that's the case for you guys and what you're passionate or interested in about isn't a club yet, start your own. It's honestly not a hard process. There's tons of like constitution templates for us, and we just have to write a constitution and get 20 members. So my friend and I started that, and we baked cakes for kids' birthdays who couldn't otherwise afford the cakes. So you can combine it with some volunteer work, combine it with your interests, and do what you're passionate about. And if it's not there, find a friend and start one, because that's always fun too. And actually not that much work. Alrighty. So the big one, I think research is like, do we have to do research? Do all pre-meds have to do research? And I think yes and no. You can absolutely get in without research. Tons of my current classmates don't have research, but then others do. Some are full on PhDs and have masters. Some have just done undergraduate research, and then a large portion haven't at all. I did research. I thought it was a great way to get reference letters, as well as I really enjoyed the research that I was doing. So I had a positive experience in it. So I personally would recommend it. But again, if you're like super against research, or that's just not what's going to make you happy, then pursue some of the other different volunteer opportunities or campus involvement or different jobs. As long as you're doing something, I think that it's okay. But in terms of why research, common source of reference letters, it shows an interest in science or an interest in an area of science, or an area of, it doesn't really matter, you can do it in the social sciences too. I did a bit of both. So I think a big question too is how to get started. I think that research sometimes seems super intimidating, but it's really not. So how I found my research supervisor was, honestly, I just emailed a bunch of people. I perused the websites and I was like, what am I interested in? Until I found a couple of people's projects that sounded cool. And then I just sent a bunch of emails. But I think it's important when you're sending emails to personalize them. So read a paper that the person has recently published. And if it's something that you're interested in, email them, talk about the paper that you read in a couple of sentences, why you're interested in it. Maybe that's your degree. Maybe you have an interest in sociology, or you have an interest in some aspect of biochemistry. It doesn't matter. Indicate why you're interested in it. Introduce yourself, and attach your CV and transcripts as well if you want, and if they're strong. I think that's pretty easy, and at least at the University of Calgary, most require it, just because a lot of the student research awards require a certain GPA. You can also volunteer prior to the summer, so that's what I did in first year. Is I found a lab that I was interested in, and it was a wet lab. I ended up switching labs in second year, so that's also an option too if you don't like the current topic. But he just wanted me to learn some of the wet lab techniques, and it was just a couple hours a week. and it wasn't too big, and that showed my interest, especially being a first-year student. And then you can also approach your own professors, talk to friends too. I've sent so many different friends to different research opportunities that I found on the internet when I was looking, but were interested for me, but they thought that it would be good for them. So to definitely talk to friends too. Oh, I think we just switched slides here. Alrighty. So my research experience, I think I did a different research project every single year, which, I mean, you could do, you cannot do too. So that the first picture is me in first year. I did a bit of wet lab research, I did immunology. My degree is in public health and anthropology. So it wasn't really geared to my undergraduate degree. So in second year, I switched to a psychosocial oncology lab, which was really fun. I really liked that. And then in third year, I went to Washington, D.C. And worked as an intern at the Smithsonian doing some occupational health research. So that's another opportunity too. You don't have to do it at your home university. I know lots of friends were from different areas of Canada, so they went back and did it at their local university as well. You can do it abroad. I did mine in Washington, D.C., but you can also do them, there's different ones in England and Hong Kong and things like that. So look at what's available for your school. Mine was an Alberta program, so it might not be available for those not in Alberta, but what I did is I didn't really know any programs available, so I just looked at our study abroad because I knew I wanted to do something outside of Calgary for the summer. And then I just went to talk to somebody at the office and kind of explain what my goals were, how long I wanted it, and then we found a program together that fit those things. And then I applied for a couple and kind of went from there. But I had tons of fun. It was really great. It was honestly more tourism and less research, but it was a bit of both, so it was lots of fun. Alrighty. So next up is jobs. So again, these can be anything, whether it's serving, lifeguarding, tutoring. I don't think it really matters. I think a job can show that you have great work ethic, as well as if you write about it, you can explain what that job taught you. And you can also combine it with a lot of other things. So all of my research was paid, so that was my job over the summers. But again, it's just about inquiring. So sometimes they might not have funding for the research, but then there's a lot of student grants. So 1 year I was, rather than being paid hourly, I did a student grant, which was fine. And just talk to the professor that you're working with or your supervisor and see what's available, whether that's hourly or paid. And definitely do that probably earlier on than later, especially if you need to be working over the summer just to make sure that your guys' goals are aligned. And then you can also too inquire about paid positions at places you volunteered. So it depends like always on the organization and whether or not they have the funding available, but as you build those relationships, a lot of the times there are some paid positions at charities and not-for-profits, especially over the summers. So looking for maybe a full-time thing there, especially because you already have a relationship with those people, and continuing the longevity of that relationship, I think is always a good thing. And then I mentioned a little bit briefly beforehand that jobs on campus is a great option too. One of my friends worked for the Leadership Student Engagement one, and he loved it. He planned different events for the students on campus. I remember I ran the baking club, so we collaborated with him and made cookies for students to decorate as a de-stress event. So it was tons of fun for him. I think it was like less serious, and he did that throughout the school year as well. So I think that you can definitely combine them. I don't think any job is a bad job. I think that a lot of people get stuck into saying, oh, I have to work a healthcare job, whether that's like a porter or some kind of health aspect related thing. But honestly, my extracurriculars were not health related at all. And I know a lot of my friends weren't either. Granted, that doesn't mean you're not going to be successful with healthcare related jobs. I think that might look good as well. But it's just honestly about what you're interested in, what works for you and what works for your circumstances. Hobbies and sports. So always, again, the giant theme of this presentation is do what interests you. I think that hobbies and sports offer a great source of balance as well as staying active. And again, that social network, at least for me in university, was super important, whether that was relying on a friend to talk to or even to excel in schoolwork, just asking questions, studying together. And you can make those through hobbies and sports. And you don't have to, I don't think you have to be super competitive. Like, you don't have to be on a varsity sports team. There's tons of intramurals that you can do, or it doesn't have to be on campus, whether you have a friend to go to yoga with or things like that. Or whether it's you like to debate or be on a debate team, or you, like me, I like to bake. Those are all hobbies and sports that you can do and you can pursue. So my experiences, I was on the rowing team in university. I had never rowed before, so it was an experience. It was fun, tons of fun. I joined the novice rowing team in first year and then kind of went from there and learned different skills, and then moved up to the varsity team. So yeah, so like you don't have to, like I honestly had never picked up an oar, never done, I didn't even know anything about it, but I saw them advertising and then a friend in my program joined. And so I was like, why not try it out? And I stuck with it throughout my full university term. So that's always an option. And like, just like what's available on campus, I don't know if that's like just a U of C thing that they take kids that who've never rowed before, or if there's other sports similar to that. I think cross country at U of C, you can just like try out for during your first year without having to be recruited or anything. And then again, intramurals or just even something that's not totally organized like yoga is always great. Then I also did a ton of horseback riding in high school. I was your typical horse girl. So that was what I was passionate about. And again, a longevity aspect. So I was passionate about horses, all things horseback riding, and that's what inspired a lot of my volunteer work throughout my time riding as well as into university, because I wasn't allowed to bring my horses with me to school. So yeah, alrighty. So that's kind of the end of the presentation. So we kind of went over a bunch of different types of extracurriculars, why they're important. And now we'll move into our questions and answers. So just check the chat box and kind of go through them, and feel free to add some more as you go. So I'll just stop sharing. 3, okay. So the first question is, for volunteer experience, is it necessary to work in a hospital or not-for-profit organization that runs adult day programs for those in dementia? I think those are great different volunteer opportunities, but would I say it's necessary? No, I didn't work in a hospital at all. I had friends that did, I had friends that didn't. All totally is fine, as long as it's something. I think the big key things here is longevity. Try and do something for a longer period of time rather than something that's one-off, and do something that interests you. So if older adults who with dementia interests you, that's honestly sounds like a great opportunity and great program to work with. All right, can we include hobbies in our application? Or does it have to be something professional like varsity and intramural? I think that you can, at least, I think you can include hobbies. So for Calgary, they require you to write a top 10. So your top 10 can literally be anything. If yoga has changed your life and is there one of your top 10 experiences, absolutely include it. And then I think like you could also include it in your omsas application as well. Like especially things like running too, like if you're into marathons, if you're into yoga and you do that every week, as long as you have to be realistic with yourself. If you're doing your hobby once a year, I don't think I would include it. If you're doing your hobby once a week, absolutely, that has a huge impact on your life and tells something about you. Same with like if you're into art, like whatever you're into, I think if you're doing it on a long-term basis and it's impacted you as a person, that's an extracurricular that you can include. Like think about it, if it asks you in an interview, what would you talk about? Is it convincing? Okay, so the next question asks about categorization of extracurriculars. And they listed a few like clinical volunteering versus non-clinical volunteering, poster presentations versus non-primary author publication. To me, I didn't organize it like that. I kind of like, when I did my omsas application, I just listed the activity and then a description of it. Same for UBC. And then Calgary was a top 10, so you had to only pick 10 of your extracurriculars. And I kind of would title it like rowing team athlete or things like that, and then talk about it. I think a big thing to talk about when you're talking about your extracurriculars is not necessarily a laundry list of what you did, but how it impacted you and what you learned from it. Because ultimately they want to see that, well, what are you learning from those extracurriculars? Are you learning stress management from yoga, and that can be applicable then to a career in medicine? Of course. Don't spell it out for them and be like, I learned stress management, I'll be a great doctor because of this. They can put 2 and 2 together. So be like, yoga's taught me so-and-so or whatever. The time I was stressed, I used yoga to stress management. Everything's great. Things like that. And then they also asked about involvement in club, counts as volunteering. It depends on the club. So for the baking club, it depends how you talk about it. A huge aspect of our mission was to create positive change while baking. So we did that through raising money for the campus food bank. We hosted de-stress sessions for students on campus during exam time and had them decorate cookies. And then every single month we baked a cake for a kid's birthday who couldn't otherwise afford a cake. So I think that would count as volunteering. Whereas if you did something like debate club where you're competing in competitions for debate and there's no kind of volunteering aspect to it, then I would say that's not volunteering. But again, I don't think you really need to categorize those too much. How many extracurriculars would you say is a minimum requirement? For Calgary, you have a top 10, so filling up that top 10. Again, it doesn't all have to be extracurriculars for Calgary. You can talk about life events and things like that, whether or not you have a child or got married or something that you've experienced, something you can talk about that. I probably had about 10 to 12 different extracurriculars that I put on my like omsas application, and I got interviews in Ontario. But I don't think there's a maximum. I think it's about, I would rather see an application. I mean, I've never like gone over applications like as an admissions person, but if I had to guess, I would like to see somebody who has longer term activities rather than 100 different short-term ones. So the next question is, how do you decide where to put activities on ABS? For example, clubs. I honestly don't totally remember. I'd have to look at the omsas application again, but I did that over a year ago now, so I don't totally remember, and I don't want to lead you guys astray. Can hobbies include personal skills? Again, I think it depends on how you talk about it, and it depends what the personal skill is. I wouldn't say communication is a hobby, but say you're really great at Spanish and you practice Spanish on a day. Like, is it something that you're doing every week? I'm not really sure on that. It depends what your personal skill is and how you talk about it. I would say it's like something that you probably should be participating in weekly. Do you have any advice on finding what you're passionate about doing? What you enjoy, try things out, do things with friends. I didn't know I would like rowing at all until I was walking by and I was like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. And then my friend was like, I'm gonna join. And it went from there. I went to the first practice and loved it. And kind of went from there. So try things out. Don't be afraid to do things that aren't your typical pre-med, and see what you like. Okay, the next one is asking about the baking club. So about how I found different birthday parties for kids who couldn't otherwise afford them. The friend who I started the club with actually one of her friends started a not-for-profit called Birthday Miracles, and she threw birthday parties for kids who couldn't afford them otherwise. So my friend was like, oh my gosh, could we bake cakes for them? And it kind of went from there and started that partnership, because obviously they're not for profit, so they try and get everything donated. So we were happy to do that, and we always had tons of fun making multiple tier cakes and going the whole 9 yards. So what is the first step in getting research experience? Honestly, Google. First, Google, see, okay, so decide where you want to do your research. Do you want to do it over the summer in your hometown? Do you want to do it at your home university? Decide on that. Then start Googling and looking at like different topics and different professors and what their research is. So what I did, I looked up the department that I was interested in. So I was interested in doing research in community health sciences. And then I just, honestly, I went through every single person and just clicked on their last research publication. Was I interested in it? If I was interested in it, I wrote it down on a list until I had about like 4 or 5. And then I emailed them all because not everybody's going to reply back to you. And I think it's definitely important to include a little bit about why you're interested in that subject matter, because they're probably getting a lot of emails. So definitely make yours personable and convincing that you're actually interested in it. What advice do you have on writing the extracurricular description? Okay, so I think that's a good question. I think that definitely clarify what the extracurricular is. Do that in like a short sentence. Because a lot of your extracurriculars, they're probably not going to know what they are or haven't heard of them. And then say in the last little bit about either like one part of it that has really impacted you or something that you've learned from it, things like that. I think that's more convincing than just listing every single event that you went to or every single thing that you did within that. All right, the next question is, when med school applications ask you about your hobbies, is it usually listing hobbies, or would you be asked to talk about your time commitment and or describe them? I think it depends on the application. So University of Calgary, your top 10 is very flexible. You can literally include anything you want. And that one asks you for a quick summary of the activity or the experience, and then an impact. But again, I think it's important to make sure that that hobby is something that actually has truly impacted you. So I could say like horseback riding was a hobby of mine throughout high school. I wrote about that on my application, and I talked about how that experience changed me. That's harder to do with those 150-word descriptions, but definitely something that you need to consider. Would you recommend going to conferences? I would recommend going to conferences if you're presenting, or if you have a super big interest in it and want to learn more about it. I don't think you can put on your application that you attended a conference just as a attendee, but I think that it can provide a great opportunity to learn more about something you're interested in or make connections. But I would recommend going to conferences to present things, whether it's a poster or a podium. I think that's something you can definitely include on your applications, and is also a great experience. Next one is, should we have a theme to our extracurriculars? What do I mean? Yeah, I think it's good to have like a story that you're telling, whether that's something that you're passionate about, but I don't think it has to be like a super specific theme. Like I did a lot of volunteering with kids, whether that was baking cakes for kids' birthdays or helping kids with disabilities learn how to horseback ride. And I did a lot of athletics, I guess, but it's not something that I had in mind. I think I let my passions guide me, and they kind of fit into different things. So I did a lot of horses too, horse stuff. And like think about how you're going to connect it to in an interview and how you're going to connect those things. Regarding putting activities in your ABS. Okay, cool. What research experience did you have prior to undergrad? I didn't do any research prior to undergrad, like at all. I didn't even know it was a thing. Like when I got to university, some of my friends had done research in high school. For me, I didn't know it was a thing. I didn't even know research in general was a thing in undergrad that you could do. It was heavily supported by my undergraduate program, and I think like pretty much everybody in my program did it. So that's kind of what I got involved, and then I really enjoyed it. If you are an undergrad, I know there are like lots of programs to get involved through high school. I'm not too familiar with the Ontario ones, but some in Alberta is like the Hires program. And again, I think probably a quick Google search can direct you to those, or talking to your high school guidance counselor. If there's no programs available, I know some of my friends from university that did research in high school honestly did the same thing that undergrads were doing, was emailing professors, going online, looking up somebody who's doing some kind of research in something that you're interested in. Honestly, I had a friend that did research in English literature. So like it literally does not have to be related to science if you don't want it to be. Email them. They'll honestly probably be impressed. And then kind of go from there, ask to meet with them, see if they have either a volunteer position if you're willing to do that, or maybe a summer grant. And so a lot of the summer grants are geared to undergrad students, but you never know. The next question is, do online certifications count as good ABS items? I personally didn't put any online certifications under ABS. I guess it depends on what it is. I think if it's like a quick 20-minute course online, I don't think I would include it. I think that's kind of seems like you're trying to stretch and reach for things. But if it was like, you know, Harvard does like big online courses right now, or like some kind of like online course that's pretty impactful, or something that you were passionate about and something that you devoted a lot of time to, then yeah, that would be, I think, something good to include. Especially right now where a lot of the opportunities that you guys have are online. So do you have any sort of special training / knowledge to be in a research position? I honestly had absolutely none. Like my first undergrad research was in immunology, and it was like wet lab techniques, like Western blotting and things. I hadn't even held on a pipette, to be totally honest, beforehand. But just find somebody that has other undergraduate students, be willing to learn, show up, and offer to volunteer beforehand, especially if you have no skills. Nobody's going to want to pay you if you're not able to actually do it. So volunteer beforehand, learn those skills, and set yourself up to be successful over the summer. What is a CV? So CV is your curriculum vitae. It's similar to a resume, but I think it's like, I would say it doesn't have like the intro thing that the resume has. I think it's more point form, I would say. It can be pretty long, like you want to kind of include everything on there. I'd recommend making a resume or a CV of your extracurriculars prior to writing your medical school applications, and kind of keeping that up on an ongoing basis. It's really good to send to different professors, send to your references when you're doing reference letters, so they can kind of know what's going on in your life, as well as it offers kind of a good mind map for when you're writing those applications. You said that, I think I already answered that. What advice do you have aspiring med students when you enter their first year? I think honestly, be open to everything. Like a lot of the opportunities that I pursued, I honestly, if you asked me a month before starting university, I would have been like, I probably would never do that, but it's just having an open mind and be prepared to do things that maybe you wouldn't otherwise want to do, and you're going to find something that you really enjoy. And then also too, making a really good group of friends. Don't like solely focus on getting good grades. That's super important, obviously, but I think a much easier way to do that is having a great social support network who's going to help support you to achieve those grades, because whether it's studying for a test, bouncing ideas off of somebody, those are all great things. Can we include things done in high school in your application? I did. I applied as a third-year student, so I only had the time of my application. I was just starting my third year, so I had 2 years of university completed. So I didn't think my high school activities were very dated. Granted, I didn't include things like that didn't have a huge impact on me. So I included like horseback riding was the main thing I included from high school. And I had done that for like 12 years at the time, at like about 20 hours a week. So it was, I think I would say, pretty significant. Something to keep in mind. It says, can we include hobbies? I think I've already answered that. The next one is, I know a lot of people are founding startups as extracurriculars. Is that necessary for med school applications? No. I mean, if you're interested in it, sure. And like you could. I think that sounds kind of cool, but honestly not necessary at all. Do what interests you. Don't try and be curing cancer and starting to make a not-for-profit. Those might obviously not be realistic. Make sure to have some balance in there is what I would say, and enjoy your undergrad. Advice here for your top 10. I think my biggest piece of advice is don't give me a long laundry list of what you did. Give me a brief summary of what you did, and then tell me how it's impacted you. I don't want to hear that you learned to be a great leader until you prove it to me through that experience. I think that would be the biggest advice for top 10. So that would be like, if you're talking about how you're a great communicator through an activity, tell me what the activity is briefly. Tell me an example of where you were a good communicator. I think an especially strong one is an example where communication went awry, how you solved it, and then how you moved forward through that activity. And again, that can be applied to any kind of interpersonal skill that you're trying to prove, but definitely prove it. How recent should your extracurriculars be? In grade school, I think that might be a bit of a stretch. I think the cutoff for Ontario, you'll have to double check, I think it's 16 though. I've been but for Calgary, I think you can put back like as far as you want, but I would recommend honestly doing, if you have more recent things, that's probably stronger. How recent should it, well, the hours you spend. And yes, I think you have to include the number of, at least for Calgary, you have to include the number of hours. I believe for Ontario, you include the time period, and it's either like the hours per week on average or total hours. I did my application 2 years ago now. It was like October of 2018. So I don't remember. I'd have to look that up. Managing time in school, that's a great question. I think that again is like combining things. So a lot of my extracurriculars were all done with friends on my university floor. So especially with the clubs, like a lot of them started clubs, and then they just hired or whatever our whole university floor to be the exec team for it. So it was really nice because we kind of did that all together, and then we also did our schoolwork together too. So I think that like having the balance of social with volunteering and with your friends is really great to manage time.